We're live. So welcome to the Hangout. Today we're going to be talking about, we haven't really determined the topic, but it's really the future of sales. And with the future of sales, we're going to start with the past of sales, and we're going to talk about the evolution of communication. So I'd like to welcome Luch on the call. G'day, Luch. How you going?
David, really well. How are you?
Yeah, good, good. So Luch and
Well,
I...
welcome to you listening in on this as well. This is it's important also to recognize the past and where client communications has evolved from. And as we go along through the remaining webinars and everything, there's a lot of valuable information to take from that, so that it really gives you an understanding of why we're talking about the things that we're talking about to improve your business and your process and your sales.
Yeah, fantastic. So, look, probably a little bit of background for everyone. Look, I've known Luch for nearly 20 years. He used to be my systems architect when we were selling internet web development in the late 90s, early 2000s. And,
those were the days, weren't they, David?
Yeah, they were the days, because people were paying big dollars for what you can now get for free. You know, we were selling websites in the vicinity of $2 million to get someone online with a shopping cart. And you can get the same thing now for, I think, probably $50.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah,
And,
so look,
and a little bit of elbow grease as well.
A little bit of elbow grease, yeah. I do remember we had some of those projects. We had 30 to 40 programmers sitting in a room developing stuff overnight.
Yeah.
So some of it was pretty intense. But the interesting part about all that is really being there for the development of web communications, especially from your point of view, from the technical side, from my point of view, from the sales and marketing side, and just really understanding what brings us to the technology we have today and how we can utilize it to streamline the sales process.
Yeah, that's right. Because one of the things that we certainly learnt during that the heydays of the internet, I guess, is that it's not just the technology. There's a lot that goes on behind the technology. The technology is a thing that makes the news, I guess. But it's about solid business foundations in the whole thing, and that's, you probably find it's a recurring theme over and over again with any of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose we sort of, if we go right back, because I remember when I started in sales, and we're talking probably 20, 25 years ago, you know, and I was a technologist. I came from a sort of techie background. I like to sort of fiddle with things. I actually had a technician. I was a technician for several years, and I remember coming into a sales arena where people were using 3x5 business card, 3x5 file cards to keep records of clients, and you know, you'd have them in this little mini teletext on your table, and you used to be able to keep a record of who you spoke to, when you spoke to them, when you need to contact them next, and there were some quite sophisticated manual systems that people would use to keep in touch with prospective clients and ongoing clients. You recall that, Luch?
Absolutely, and I think when it came to the 3x5s, I certainly recall, I was the techie at the time. The guys who were using those maybe had, I don't know, 50, 100 of these in a little pack, and they would sort through and they'd have them indexed and say, oh yeah, on Monday I need to call this lot, and on Tuesday I need to call this lot, and each time in the morning they would come in and they would look at these cards and go, okay, so what are the top 5 calls that I need to make, and what is it that I need to brush up on before calling them and the like. And you know, there were in that list of cards, there was probably, how many, David? 50, 100 cards?
Yeah, we used to have a system called 42, I think it was 43 files. And what you would have is you'd have this system of a expanding file, and one of them would be like months, so the 12 months of the year, and the other one would be the 31 days of the month. And what you'd do is you take these cards, and as you spoke to someone and you worked out when you needed to contact them next, if it was within that month, you'd put them into the day. And if it was in a future month, you'd put them into the month file. And at the end of every month, you'd grab those cards and whack them in there, and it was quite archaic but effective.
It was, and you know, many of the motor vehicle companies run on a very, very similar process. It's a whole Kanban process, isn't it?
Yep.
These things need to be done today. There's a remainder. In fact, in those industries, it's more like on an hourly basis or on a per minute basis. But yeah, it's the same kind of process.
Yeah, so really, I remember that was how I started, and the beauty of it is everything was there. These cards were like gold. You know, you'd manage these cards and you'd keep little notes on there, and if you ran out of space, you'd staple another card to it. And then I was exposed to something in those days. It was called Tracker, and I don't know if you recall Tracker as a well, let's call it CRM because that's what it is. It was a contact management system, but it was written in DOS. And what that meant is, for those who don't know what DOS is, it's the old computer programming language, which basically meant you had characters on the screen and nothing else.
Before mouse, so BM.
And yeah, before mouse. And we used to use this system, and it was head and shoulders above having the cards because now it was all on the computer. And the computer could manage the next contact date, and it could manage the last contact date, and you could keep the notes in there, and you didn't have to staple cards together. And now you had this facility where you could keep all this information in one place. So I started using this technology, and some of the old guys would look at me and shake their head and go, "Oh, this modern technology, I just don't get it." And I'd be looking at them saying, "How can you not use this? This is so much easier than using the cards." And we'd have this constant toing and froing argument. Now, if you think about what it was all about, it was never really about which was the better technology. It was always about making sure that we kept track of the conversations we were having with people and that we could actually anticipate when to call them next and be pretty timely in our communication.
Yeah.
So
David, just if I could interject a little, why even bother to communicate with clients? Why even bother to plan a communication with clients?
Yeah, see, and this is now a sales question. Okay, one of the things I learned very early when I started selling is that there's two kinds of sales. Okay, there's opportunity-driven sales, which is really, you know, like you walk into a car yard and you're looking for a car, and typically in that scenario, there's not a lot of rapport building. There's not a lot of getting to know each other. It's really about, this is what I want. Can you help me? Yes or no? And the
in the tech space, or the tech industry that we're in, we refer to it as the transactional sale.
Yeah. So that type of sale really required a very sharp and on-the-ball salesman who had like 3 minutes to impress you and to grab your wallet and to steal some money out of it. And so this sort of led to that whole persona of the hard sell salesperson. And when I started in sales, that was something I never wanted to be. I never saw hard sell sales as something attractive. I know some of these guys could make good money, but I also knew that they were pretty pushy, right? And no one really likes to be sold to. And so then what I found is that there's another kind of sales, which is a relationship-based sales procedure or sales process. And for me, that was quite appealing because it was like making friends with someone, getting to know them, getting to like them, getting to trust them, comparing notes, talking about what you can offer, and working out ways to help them. So as opposed to being straight up front transactional sale, we were now talking about consultative selling. Now, what consultative selling means in essence is rather than just knocking on your door and trying to sell you pots and pans, I'm actually knocking on your door to say g'day, to actually do a bit of an analysis of who you are, what you do, how is it that I can make your life better or your business better or whatever it is that I'm working on, go and do some research, come back with a solution, as opposed to just straight up selling. And that appealed to me because that was really, you know, that's about relationship. So when we talk about these systems of keeping in touch, the whole notion of building a relationship through constant and regular contact is key. And when you're working as a salesperson, there's so many potential relationships like that we need to work out how to manage these relationships.
Yeah.
If we relied on our memory alone, we could probably work with 2 or 3 people, but working with hundreds and hundreds of prospects would be overwhelming and quite challenging.
And this is what more and more companies and more businesses are actually faced with on a day-to-day basis. It's not about the single, you know, it's no longer about the handful of potential prospects that they have. It's now about, as they extend their reach onto the internet and further, social media as well. It's now about who is there out there, and in an increasing number, and it becomes even more difficult to manage.
Yeah. So here's some of the realities that's occurred in 20 years that we've known each other. The amount of communication channels that are available has multiplied by an order of magnitude. Because when I started selling, you know, there were basically 2 options. You either spoke to someone face to face or you spoke to them on the phone.
Yeah.
And email wasn't even strong in those days. There was like pages, so people could ring your paging service, and then I'd have to pull over on the side of the road, find a phone booth, and make a phone call. So if you think about what happened, we brought in mobile communication, mobile phones. We brought in internet email, which meant people could now correspond not by letter but by email. And now, more recently, with the social side of things, we now probably have in excess of 100 different channels that we need to work with or manage to keep this communication going. So it's almost like the technology now is becoming necessary just to manage the channels, let alone the communication, which we always used to manage in a more manual way.
Yeah. And a lot of that reason, a lot of the reason for that, I was reading a Deloitte report from Deloitte Consulting, indicating that the average Australian now has 3 devices and is actively using 3 devices: mobile phone, tablet, and a notebook or computer, to both socialize as well as do their work. So now it's not just getting access to these people through technology, but it's customizing your communication depending on the device that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And really there is no one answer. Because some people prefer the smartphone, some people prefer the tablet, some people prefer the laptop, and some people are still traditionalists and say, you know what, if I'm not talking to someone live, I'm not really communicating. Now, the irony of even that one is that we've now got chat sessions going on people's websites, you know, so shopping carts
We've
now
got
have little...
webinars going on as well, David. We're recording webinars.
Yeah, absolutely. So having these sorts of conversations and being able to record them and make them available for people to watch at their leisure, that's another channel.
Yeah.
So, you know, the question that arises, and if we look at the evolution, what's occurring is the number of times we contact people is greater because there's more channels. The amount of contact people are almost expecting is more and faster. You know, the response time that we expect from people these days, if you go back 50 years, you could wait a week or two to get a response to a letter. And
it's increasingly, it's the relationship sale as opposed to the transactional sale that is winning out. The stats that indicates that a very small percentage, something like about 3% of sales will close on the first piece of communication, whereas 90% of sales will close after about the 6th or 7th piece of communication. And so having a system in place, and this is why customer relationship management tools or contact management tools came about in the first place, recognizing that having a system in place to allow you to keep on communicating with prospects, building that relationship, developing rapport, providing them with knowledge and information is the thing that ultimately leads to the sale.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if we think about how you manage that, you know, in the good old days, the cards used to work fine. Even before that, people didn't use cards. You know, the way you build a relationship is you're in a little community, you get to know people, they get to know you, and, you know, when they have a need, you can identify it. There's only 10 people that you need to know. So the expectation in those days was, well, if you're a good salesperson, you would have some level of recall or memory about those people, so you didn't need any system.
Yeah, David, what's important to have as a even a rudimentary, the most basic contact management database, if we're talking about maintaining or putting in place a system, and by system I mean processes, but putting in place a system that helps with client communications, what are the important elements to have as part of that?
Yeah, look, good question. Ultimately, there is still no perfect way to do this. It depends on the volume of communication that you have to manage with and the number of channels. So if you think about how many prospective clients you're dealing with at any point in time, how many modes of communication those people use, and then the volume or the number of communications events that need to occur, this is going to give you an idea of what you need. So for some people, a spreadsheet is fine. And I've met a lot of people in business, and they use a spreadsheet to manage their communication. They have their name, the phone number, and the email address of the person they're communicating with. They keep notes. And
I would also presume purchasing information, what they've bought in the past, what they're likely to buy, buyer intent, things like some of the opportunities that you might be working on. If you're managing a sales opportunity with a single client or a single prospect or a group of prospects, just having that information just helps you be focused on what it is that you end up communicating with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could use, people were using spreadsheets, they still do. Some people just use a Word document because really it's just somewhere to store the data. And some people still use handwritten notes and they keep them in their calendar or they keep them in these cards. It really comes down to what people are comfortable with. But the thing that's exciting for me is the way technology has advanced and see, the more we're moving into an age where people are using things like computers to do browsing, computers to communicate, so smartphones, Skype, Google, all these sorts of things. It's sort of pushing us into an area where, okay, having a piece of paper with an email address on it is actually inconvenient because I have to type it in every time I want to send someone something. So
yeah, and it's interesting that you should say that the thing that excites you is the technology and what the technology enables, which, by the way, in later webinars we're going to be talking extensively about how to use technology to automate a lot of the things that we're discussing. The thing that excites me is that it's about the process that you put in place, and it's still, and it's something that, David, you recall I was saying 20 years ago, it's not about the technology, as exciting as that is. It's about the processes that you put in place, because the technology is there to support the process, not the other way around. And so in the next webinar as well, we're going to be talking more about how to put in place a sales funnel process for the whole thing, which is all simple.
And I suppose my reasoning behind that is, being from a sales background, the process is pretty much there all the time. If ever I'm training salespeople or I'm talking to business owners about selling, the very first thing I ask is, what's your process? Do you have a flow chart? Do you have a way that you communicate? And most people scratch their head and go, we don't need a process. People ring us and we sell them stuff.
That's a big message to take away if you're listening into this particular webinar. It's not about the technology. The technology goes so far, and it's designed to support the process. And I think anybody who comes along and says, oh, get the technology in place and it will give you the process, this is perhaps the biggest mistake that we saw large corporates making, where they brought in millions and millions of dollars worth of technology only to have it fail because they didn't have a process in place for what it was that they were going to do. And this is now an opportunity for smaller businesses, smaller, medium-sized businesses, to actually pick up on and be a little smart about, because it's get the process right, or at least get a foundation to your process in place, and then use that to drive the technology.
That's a good point, because I remember in those days when we were selling CRMs, and I was working with Australia Post, and at that point in time they had 13 disparate computer systems working in different departments within Australia Post, and somehow or other they came to the conclusion that if they could have a centralized contact management system that meant there was only one copy of your name, phone number, email address, mail address, that would save them money. As it turns out, the technology was worth millions and millions of dollars, and it actually didn't save them any money at all. It cost them more money than it was worth. And I think this sort of really demonstrates what you just discussed, which is technology for technology's sake doesn't make any sense. And to think that having one contact record is going to save you money, as opposed to, well, we should use these technologies to actually improve our processes or make our processes more consistent, is a very different message.
And it's kind of a scenario that if you get a process in place that works, and there's I guess there's different people that you'll talk to about how to go about designing a process that's going to work for you. Processes can be effective, they can be ineffective, but once you get one that works for you, then could you imagine what it's like if you could ramp up the speed of that, or ramp up the efficiency of that, or ramp up the cost to, as it ramp down, take down the cost to do that by factors of exponential factors. That's what the technology lets you do. It builds on the process and then improves the efficiency of all of those. And I think this is probably a good segue into beginning to talk about the most important thing to do with any sales process or any sales funnel is to map it out, which is what the next webinar is all about.
Absolutely. So really, like, today was more about history, more about background, more about the understanding why, and really, I suppose, the need for having a systemized approach. And ultimately, there's some interesting statistics around about the volume of communication or marketing messages the average person receives. If we go back to 1992, the average person was receiving 2,000 marketing messages a day in some way, shape, or form, and that would be through reading a newspaper, actually seeing a billboard, listening to the radio, watching TV. By 1993, it was up to 3,000, and the anticipated number now in 2014 is up around the 30,000 messages a day. Now, it sounds like a lot, but you think about how many messages, marketing messages you see if you look at your Facebook feed, or if you looked at your LinkedIn feed, or if you're actually on your smartphone in any way, shape, or form, the amount of email that we get. So what we're competing with now is people's attention. It's not even competing against competitors, it's actually competing against someone going delete. And so, when we think about sales process now, the theory is the same, right? The purpose of a sales process is to anticipate a person's needs along the way and engage in a relationship where they see value. The only difference is we used to do it by speaking to them face-to-face or by making phone calls. Now what we're doing is we're starting to use some of the technology that's available to actually augment or to support the same process. So I suppose what I'm getting to with this is that the need to have technology to support the sales process is now becoming non-optional, unless you're in a market where you don't have any competitors, because the guy that starts using the technology is going to be having automated email responders, autoresponders. They're going to have video that demonstrates things to people 24/7. So if I'm looking online and I'm browsing around looking for a new car, the guy that I go onto the site of that actually has a little video that demonstrates the benefits of the car is selling to me while he's asleep. So this technology exists, right? And I don't think a lot of people understand how simple it is to implement, as long as you have a sales process.
The two go hand in hand, and I think the reason that it's so much more effective today is because people understand it a lot more. The technology has. The reason it's come down in price is because people are accepting of it. People understand it. People anticipate its behavior. It can be applied, and it's so much more flexible. And now, when it gets applied to a sales process, and we're talking about, again, we keep coming back to the word process, having a sequence of steps. It's no longer, the gut feel that you have about when you're dealing with a prospect or a lead, and are they going to buy, or how interested are they? You actually apply a sales process, and it kind of flips everything on its head. And the reason for that is because there is now a science being applied to the whole thing, the science of technology as well as the science of creating the process.
Okay, so really let's talk about what we're going to cover in this series, because I know, look, it's a very big topic. A lot of people come to me and they ask the question, which CRM should I use, or which software system? And I think it's the wrong question. I think the question people need to be asking is, how can I best service my prospects, my customers? How can I give them the information they need at the right time? And once we start by thinking about what that is, then we can go backwards and say, well, which system or process or product will deliver the service the way I need it delivered?
Absolutely.
So over the sequence, I think we're going to start by talking about pure and fundamental sales process without even talking about technology at all. We're going to talk about customer interaction and prospect interaction and meeting their needs. And then once we put those pieces together, then we can start looking at, well, what technologies are going to allow us to deliver what we need to deliver in the most cost-effective manner.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's working out what needs to be in place first before you apply the technology. There are so many technological solutions out there, and to preempt that would be incorrect. And then this is the thing that a lot of the corporates were making 20 years ago, and many still to this day, buying technology for the sake of technology, knowing that it's failing.
Yeah. So look, we're sort of getting to the end of this call. Just to sort of wrap up and make sure that people are clear on what we're going to be covering. The whole notion behind today was to talk about the history and where it's come from. And I suppose the clear message that we've got out of today is it's not just about the technology, it's actually about the human communication that's required in a sales process, and defining that, and then looking at ways technology can enhance that.
Yeah. So in subsequent webinars, in the next webinar, we'll be talking mostly about steps to building a sales funnel. What is a sales funnel? What's involved in building it? How to evaluate what a good sales funnel looks like. We talk about things like cost of acquiring leads, and yeah, these are again non-technological things. These are pure business sense. After that, we talk about and provide an example, and David will walk you through flow charting a sales process, looking at a number of paper solutions for flow charting a sales process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting it out of your head and onto paper gives you an opportunity to think about how it works, put it into practice, and then look at ways of optimizing it, which we'll all be talking about in the third webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we really want to leave people with today is I want you to think about what are you actually trying to achieve, okay? What is the outcome of the sale, and what are the important aspects or factors that your product or service you need to demonstrate or you need to show people in advance so that we can start thinking about how they fit in with the sales process. So think about outcome. What am I trying to achieve? Is it a sale of a product? Is it a next meeting? Is it a tender that we're presenting? Great. So what are the aspects or what are the factors that the prospect or the potential customer needs to tick off their list to make sure that they're happy doing business with us? And if we start thinking about that first, then we can integrate that into the sales process on the next webinar.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, Luch, well, great to catch up. I'm looking forward to putting this together. It's going to be pretty exciting and testing out the new technology as we love it. And I look forward to speaking with you and also everyone else who's been listening in next time.
And thanks for tuning in.
Awesome. Thanks, Luch.
Cheers.